Stephen gave us the Hamilton model. We, through the Alberta Homelessness Research Consortium, we advocated when we had some money available for pilot projects that the communities get together and not 25 agencies submit for the 4 funding grants, but ultimately a community get together and find 4 partnerships that could aid in their evolution and their development. So ultimately, what I see is kind of 2-tier. You get your funding on an annual basis, and there's competition for that, which burns us all out. I think we're all in grant writing mode right now, right, for the end of March. So, most of us are going to be burnt out from that. Then on top of it all, we're trying to value add to our funding envelopes by going after different grants at different times. That's where I find most of the competition comes into play, and that's where most of the bad feeling comes into play. So ultimately, if there's a centralized agency or a centralized hub of some kind that can monitor when all of these call for proposals are released and not prescribe who is entitled to apply, because everybody can, but more so try and develop moments of synergy where we can all sit at the table and see how we can break off into groups that can operate and then ultimately generate a really good proposal through enhanced capacity building. I think that would be one of many, but it would be a very good model at this point in time. Like I say, it's very difficult, but it's the value-added grants that tend to be the most contentious. Their perceptions of the world are just, they're so finite and limited compared to somebody who's 35, 40, 50 years old who's been working in the system. They don't understand that pursuit is for their own good, but they see it as a pursuit and perhaps being incarcerated to a degree, right? We spoke with one youth, and he goes, I don't define myself as homeless because I've never had a home. Okay, so that's as heartbreaking as it gets, right? On so many levels, but others, we see it more as a protective mechanism in the sense that if they admit that they're homeless, society's perception of the homeless is those groups of individuals that need an absolute level of help. So if they admit that they've been jettisoned from their home, they're failing in school or having difficulty, they can't keep a leasehold at this moment in time, their old social network now stigmatizes them as, oh, you're one of those. To admit homelessness is, I think, it's like playing Jenga. You pull out the final piece and it all collapses. So I see it more as a defense mechanism to say, no, I'm not homeless. In fact, I see it as empowering. I couch surfed for the last 90 days. Could you do that? Right, so what we've got are if we get into sociology, we call it the ontological perspective. We've got differing world views as to what social justice means, as to what pursuit means, as to what empowerment means. And so all of a sudden what we are doing is we're trying to reconcile a developing youth's perspective and an individual that may have addictions issues and mental health issues and their reality, which overlaps with dozens of separate realities, and they're all trying to find their little niche. We're trying to reconcile that with an individual who has been tasked with perhaps going out and finding them and informing them of the system, which on top of it could be just another overlapping element, which could crush the structure. But at the same time, that's our job and we're supposed to do it. So the idea here in terms of systems, I know that there's funding systems and there's provincial and there's federal and municipal systems. Now all of a sudden, it's all important to speak to the youth lens on what's going on. And that's why we're doing this research and we're talking to the kids themselves, because we never thought of that. And like I said, when Franklin and Roxana and I spoke a few weeks ago, Franklin brought up the issue, goes, how can they not consider themselves homeless at this point? But at the same time, they can sit down and they can see into your soul as to whether you're devoted to your job or not, right? Like they are so perceptive on so many levels, and then you say, well, you're homeless. Oh, no, I'm not, right? So these issues are manifold, but ultimately the bottom up, starting with the youth lens, that to me is the starting point. And that's why, like, I and others would advocate kind of a centralized hub where it can become a repository of not only information and data, but it's kind of the centralized meeting ground for everybody who is working in the field. Because like you said, what we learn this month, in 2 months' time, because of the fluidity of the community, it might not apply at all. Like we might go from 2/3 males to 2/3 females at that point. 2/3 males who are 21 to 2/3 females who are 16, and 4 of them have kids. And just the dynamics that are involved demands a much more fluid response on our part. So. And that's why we advocate developing different taxonomies, right? Because you're going to have absolute homeless who are 15 years old, and you're going to have couch surfing, then you're going to have ones that fall in kind of that liminal space where they don't belong to the system, but they don't belong to their family anymore. And when I say the word belong, that's how they feel. They feel like a product that's being manipulated on so many levels at this stage. Family didn't want us, so they got rid of us. The system can't deal with us, so it keeps pushing us to different agencies. So they find themselves in this kind of gray area where community doesn't exist and where, for the most part, they don't exist. So there's an invisibility there. So in terms of taxonomizing what homelessness is, I think that's absolutely vital. But just by way of the research, the kids, when we asked them what home meant, stability, that was it, right? And so when you start talking about stability within that example, stability is being able to go to school while at the same time visit people downtown at 2 o'clock, while at the same time still being able to make your job at 6 o'clock. How are we going to do that? I don't think it's incumbent upon them to figure it out. I think it's incumbent upon us to develop the process that allows at least a little bit of flexibility. Funding supports, employment counseling, employment placement. That was one thing that the kids talked a lot about. If you could put us at a company, you know what, I would love that. And you know what, probably 2/3 of them are not going to be able to handle that responsibility, but the fact of the matter is they're thinking that far ahead, that they want that stability. They want somebody to direct them, and from there, most of them think that they can do it. They're going to fail along the way, right? But ultimately, that's just the way it goes. So what we're finding is that ultimately stability is the key issue. And once that stability breaks down, then the hope starts to shatter a little bit, and we start to the system just crumbles at that stage, irrespective of the efforts that we put in. That's why it's got to be bottom up, right?